Alira had seen a lot of strange things in her life, but nothing, not even losing her husband or raising a son alone, could have prepared her for the hand reaching out from beneath the mossy ground. 34-year-old Alira Moreno, a nurse-turned-waitress, with mocha-toned skin, curly chestnut hair always tied in a frizzy ponytail, and weary hazel eyes, lived on the edge of the quiet mountain town of Windmere Hollow with her 8-year-old son Milo. Life had been tough since her husband's passing, but her strength came from her little boy's laugh and their daily nature walks through the woods near their tiny rental cabin. That Sunday, the wind blew with a chill sharper than usual. As Alira clutched Milo's hand, he in his oversized yellow hoodie, face smudged with cookie crumbs, they wandered deeper into the thicket. Milo was chasing squirrels when he froze. "Mama, look," he pointed. Beneath a blanket of wet leaves and tangled roots, a pale hand twitched. Alira's instincts kicked in. She dropped to her knees, heart racing. The man, barely visible, gasped, "Water, please." His face, bruised, pale, early 40s, gritted with blood and dirt, stared up at her with eyes filled with terror and desperation. Without hesitation, Alira gave him water from her flask and began digging with her bare hands. "Milo, run to the house, call 911, tell them someone's buried alive." The forest was silent but for the man's labored breathing and the frantic rustling of Alira's trembling fingers through dirt. And then he whispered something so soft she almost missed it. "They tried to kill me." Alira's heart thundered in her chest as she worked furiously, her fingers bleeding from clawing through the stubborn earth. The man's breath was shallow, his skin ghostly pale, smeared with mud and blood. He looked to be in his early 40s, with a strong jaw now streaked with grime, short dark hair matted against his forehead and full lips cracked from dehydration. His deep brown eyes, bloodshot and glazed, locked onto hers with equal parts terror and relief. He was dressed in a ruined gray suit torn and stiff with dried blood. The expensive fabric clung to his lean frame, now half swallowed by the forest floor. Alira didn't know who he was, but the sheer horror of his condition silenced any hesitation. Her instinct screamed to act. "Milo's gone to get help," she told him, brushing leaves from his face. "You're safe now. Just hold on." "Names?" he rasped. "Cassian. Cassian Rowe." Alira's eyes widened. She recognized the name. Cassian Rowe, the missing real estate mogul who disappeared 2 weeks ago. Headlines had speculated everything from suicide to escape, but he was here, buried, left to die. "They buried me," Cassian whispered, voice cracking. "My wife, my best friend. They thought I was dead." Alira blinked back, tears, horrified. "You're going to make it, I promise." Sirens wailed in the distance. Milo had reached help. Cassian's eyes fluttered closed and Alira gripped his hand tighter. "Stay with me," she begged, unaware that in that moment both of their lives were being rewritten forever. The emergency room was awash in artificial light and antiseptic, humming with a sterile urgency. Alira sat hunched in a molded plastic chair, her hoodie streaked with dirt, her hands trembling despite the warm tea offered by a nurse. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Cassian's face, his words, that desperate whisper. "My wife, my best friend." Milo sat beside her, quietly drawing in his sketchbook, the way he always did when something felt too big. She glanced at her son's innocent face, then back at the double doors beyond which Cassian's life hung in the balance. A doctor emerged, clipboard in hand. "You're the one who found him?" Alira nodded quickly. "Yes, I'm Alira Moreno. Is he going to make it?" The doctor sighed. "He's lucky you got to him in time. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, and multiple bruised ribs, but he's stable now. We're keeping him overnight." Relief washed over her in a wave that nearly buckled her knees. Later that night she was allowed to see him. Cassian lay in a private recovery room, eyes half open, tubes in his arms, face scrubbed clean but still pale. His dark hair had been trimmed and his voice was little more than a whisper. "You saved my life," he rasped, locking eyes with her. "I couldn't just leave you there." His lips twitched with something between gratitude and disbelief. "They left me to die. My own wife, my best friend, for money." Alira swallowed hard, heart pounding. He looked so broken, not just physically, but deep down in his soul, and she recognized it. The hollow place where trust had once lived. For a moment neither spoke. Only the steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the room. "You're safe now," she finally whispered. They didn't win, but something told her this was only the beginning. The following morning the media exploded with headlines. Cassian Rowe found alive after disappearance. Billionaire real estate tycoon rescued by local woman. News vans descended on Windmere Hollow like locusts. Alira ignored every knock at her door. Inside her small rental home, nestled in the woods, she brewed strong coffee and tried to shield Milo from the storm brewing outside. Her son, who had returned to school that morning, had no idea the man they found in the forest was now on every news station in the state. Cassian had been moved to a private facility under police protection. He refused to speak to reporters, choosing instead to ask for Alira. When she arrived at the guarded clinic, he sat in a wheelchair near the window. sunlight cutting across his face, highlighting the fading bruises on his pale skin. He wore a fresh set of clothes, but the haunted look remained. "Alira," he greeted softly, his voice stronger than the day before. She smiled gently. "You're looking better." "I don't feel better," he admitted. Verena and Nolan, they planned it for months, transferred assets, drugged me, buried me alive after the board vote. They wanted me gone permanently." Alira listened, every word making her stomach churn. The betrayal was staggering, but something in Cassian's eyes flickered, determination. "I want them to pay," he said, and in that moment she realized he wouldn't just survive, he'd come back stronger, and he needed someone who believed in him. Without thinking, she said, "Then let's make that happen." For the first time in weeks, Cassian Rowe, once the towering name behind a billion-dollar real estate empire, felt something close to hope. Alira sat across from him in the quiet clinic room, her hands folded on her lap, still dressed in the same green hoodie and jeans, her mocha-toned skin glowing faintly in the filtered sunlight. Her curly chestnut hair was frizzing around her face, but her hazel eyes held a calm fire. "I know people," Cassian said slowly. "Or at least, I used to." "You still have resources?" Alira asked carefully. He nodded. "Some. They tried to cut me off, but I had fallback accounts. Hidden ones Verena didn't know about, but my son, they told Jonathan I died. He's with Verena." Alira leaned forward, her voice fierce. "Then that's the first thing we fix." Cassian's throat tightened. "I don't even know how to reach him without alerting her. She'll spin it, she always does." "I know what that feels like," Alira said, her voice thick. "When my husband died of cancer, people started treating me like I was invisible, alone. I had to fight to be heard, but I got stronger. And now I fight for others, like you." A beat passed between them. Shared pain, mutual resilience. "I don't know why you'd help me," he whispered. "Because no one helped me, and because you survived when no one wanted you to. That means something." Cassian felt his throat close. No business deal, no acquisition, no luxury had ever touched him like this stranger's kindness. And for the first time since he clawed his way out of that grave, he believed in something again. Someone. Alira stood up. "You rest. I'll be back tomorrow. We've got work to do." As she left, Cassian leaned back and closed his eyes, replaying her words. They weren't just allies now. They were fire forged in ashes, and he would burn everything down to get his son back. 3 days later, Cassian Rowe sat in the dim corner of a private office in the back of the clinic, dressed in simple clothes, dark jeans and a navy cotton shirt that still smelled faintly of antiseptic. His short dark hair was finally clean, and the bruises on his pale, lean face were fading into a sickly yellow. But the haunted look in his deep brown eyes remained. Alira entered quietly, clutching a battered laptop and a folder of documents. Her mocha-toned skin glowed with determination, and her chestnut curls were pulled back tightly. The sleeves of her worn hoodie were pushed up, revealing a faint scar on her forearm. Just one of many quiet battles she never talked about. "You ready for this?" she asked, sitting across from him. Cassian nodded. "Let's take them down." She opened the folder. "I found something. Verena forged your medical records, signed off on a death certificate that was never filed officially, but she sent it to your attorney. That's why no one questioned your disappearance. She declared me dead before the soil even settled," he muttered, rage creeping into his voice. Alira slid over a photo. "This is the man who notarized it. Retired paramedic named Julian Ricks, has a history of falsifying medical forms, paid off by people like Verena." Cassian stared at it. "So she's got a pattern." "She does," Alira said. "But now we've got patterns too." On the laptop, she had pulled financial reports, traced wire transfers, and located quiet offshore accounts. Her nights after waitressing were now spent digging into the digital shadows of billionaires. "I don't know how you know how to do this," he said, almost smiling. She shrugged. "I was married to an accountant. He taught me a lot before he got sick. It stuck." Cassian leaned back, looking at her like she was more miracle than woman. "You're not just saving my life, you're rebuilding it. And when it's done," Alira said, standing, "you'll walk into the world again, with the truth behind you and your enemies exposed." He stood too, slowly, still sore from healing wounds. "Then let's get to work." The air between them was charged, not just with purpose but with something unspoken. They weren't just a billionaire and a waitress anymore. They were a team, and the storm was just beginning to build. The rain came hard that night, beating against the windows of Alira's small rental home like fists demanding to be let in. Inside, Milo was asleep under his dinosaur blanket, his soft snores the only reminder that innocence still existed in their chaotic world. Alira sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her hoodie sleeves pushed to her elbows. The warm glow of a nearby lamp lit her face, mocha-toned skin pulled tight with focus, hazel eyes squinting at the screen and a pencil stuck behind her ear. Her curly chestnut hair had come loose from its tie, falling in wisps around her cheeks. Across from her, Cassian Rowe, still lean and healing, wore a fresh gray sweater and black jeans. His pale skin had regained some color, though the lines on his face showed the stress of betrayal. He sipped from a chipped mug, eyes locked on her every keystroke. "You tracked the shell company?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "It links back to Verina's college roommate. She's been laundering money through a property rental firm. Cayman Islands very slick." Cassian shook his head. "I never saw any of this. I was too busy building empires." "And she was busy building her escape plan," Illyra replied. A moment passed. "You know," he added, voice softer, "I used to think power meant control. But being buried alive, that stripped everything away. Money, titles, all gone. You don't think about boardrooms when you're suffocating under dirt." Illyra's hazel eyes softened. "What do you think about my son?" he said without hesitation. "The last time I saw him he was waving goodbye from the driveway. I didn't know it would be the last time." Illyra leaned in. "It won't be." He met her gaze and something passed between them again. Raw, unscripted truth. They were two people scarred by life, brought together by unthinkable circumstances. She straightened. "Tomorrow we visit someone. A private investigator I trust, he's ex-cybercrimes. Can help you get access to the company's servers and files Verina doesn't know you've seen." Cassian gave a half-smile. "How do you know all these people?" She shrugged. "Life introduces you to strange allies when you survive hard things." As thunder rolled across the mountains, they returned to their work. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, two survivors plotted justice. The next morning, Illyra drove her aging blue pickup truck along a winding mountain road with Cassian seated beside her. The sky was still gray from the night's storm, and fog crept between the trees like secrets waiting to be discovered. They arrived at a secluded cabin nestled on the edge of a ravine. A hand-painted wooden sign read, "Harlan Cole, Problem Solver." Harlan, in his late 50s, was a grizzled man with sun-worn skin, sharp green eyes, and a slight limp. He wore an old sheriff's jacket and carried a coffee mug that said, "Trust no one." "You brought me a billionaire," Harlan said, raising an eyebrow at Cassian. "I thought you just cleaned up messes from bar fights, Illyra." "Now we're cleaning up attempted murder," she replied flatly. Cassian explained everything: Verina's betrayal, the false documents, the offshore laundering. Harlan listened in silence. "I need evidence," Cassian finished. "Hard proof," Harlan nodded slowly. "You'll get it. But if they buried you once, they'll try again. You sure you're ready to go public?" Cassian didn't hesitate. "Yes," Harlan leaned back. "All right then, let's burn down the lies." They left the cabin that day with a plan, and a digital trail leading straight to Verina's crimes. Back at Illyra's cabin, the transformation began. Cassian converted the guest bedroom into a war room. Whiteboards filled with flowcharts, printouts taped to the walls, data crawling across multiple laptops. His pale face, still healing, was now illuminated by the screen's glow. He looked like a man reborn, not just surviving but fighting. Illyra worked beside him each night, her hazel eyes darting across spreadsheets, her curly hair pulled into messy buns. They barely spoke about anything personal, just tactics, evidence, timelines. But in the quiet moments between tasks, something deeper stirred. Longing, inspoken gratitude, and a fragile connection formed not from romance, but from mutual survival. Harlan's digital forensics revealed how Verina and Nolan rerouted millions of Cassian's assets to dummy corporations. One document, an internal memo, mentioned finalizing the burial arrangement. The wording was enough to implicate them in Cassian's attempted murder. "We're almost there," Illyra said, holding up the paper. "We just need a public moment, a place to reveal it all." Cassian nodded grimly. The charity gala, the same one that Verina was now hosting in his memory. Poetic justice. Verina Lancaster Rowe looked stunning in red silk, her blonde hair curled to perfection, her skin glowing under the lights of the ballroom. The charity gala, titled the Cassian Legacy Fund, was a media circus. She smiled graciously for the cameras, flanked by Nolan Crane, Cassian's former best friend and business partner. The man's salt-and-pepper beard and forced somber expression didn't mask his greed. "Tonight we honor Cassian Rowe," Verina announced to the crowd, her voice carefully trembling. "A man taken too soon." Backstage, Illyra stood with Cassian, who now wore a black tailored suit, a mask of calm over the storm within. His pale face had regained color, and his short dark hair was neatly styled. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes, held fury and clarity. "You don't have to do this," Illyra said softly. "I do," he replied. "For my son, for everyone who's ever been betrayed." As Verina finished her speech and raised her champagne glass, Cassian stepped out onto the stage. The crowd gasped. Flashbulbs exploded. "Hello, Verina," he said into the mic. "I'm not dead, but after tonight, your reputation might be." Chaos erupted. Verina dropped her glass. Nolan froze mid-step. Cameras rolled without blinking. Reporters swarmed the stage. Cassian, standing tall despite weeks of pain, held up a folder. "This contains documentation of asset laundering, forged medical records, and attempted murder. You buried me in the woods, but I lived, and I remember everything." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Verena stepped forward, her voice shaking. "This is insane." "He's not well," Cassian cut her off. "Julian Ricks is in custody. He confessed. Harlan Cole's investigation is already with the authorities. You'll both be arrested tonight." On cue, officers in plain clothes stepped out from the wings. Nolan tried to run but was tackled. Verena screamed as she was handcuffed. The crowd was speechless. Cassian turned to them one last time. "Use your wealth to lift others. Don't let it poison your soul." He walked off stage into the quiet with Illyra at his side. Days later, Cassian stood on a quiet porch in the hills of Colorado where his son Jonathan was being kept safe by his former housekeeper. Jonathan, 12 years old, stared at him with wide brown eyes. "Dad," Cassian knelt. "Hey kiddo." Jonathan ran into his arms. They held each other for a long time. Cassian wept, openly, freely. "I thought you were gone," Jonathan whispered. "Never again," Cassian replied. Illyra watched from the car, wiping her eyes. She knew what that kind of reunion meant. It was a beginning. With Verena and Nolan awaiting trial, Cassian made headlines again, this time for launching the Phoenix Trust, a foundation for survivors of betrayal, abuse, and financial manipulation. Illyra, now his operations director, stood beside him at the press conference. Her green hoodie had been traded for a navy blazer, but she remained the same, sharp, grounded, and resilient. Cassian credited her publicly for saving his life, not once but every single day since. Reporters asked if they were together. Cassian smiled but gave no answer. Their story, he said, was still being written. One evening back at the cabin, Illyra and Cassian sat on the porch. Milo played with Jonathan near the woods. Illyra sipped wine, the twilight painting her mocha-toned skin in gold. "You could have disappeared again. Most men would have." "I'm not most men," Cassian replied. "I noticed." They laughed softly. She turned to him. "You ever think about what's next?" He looked at her, eyes full of things unspoken. "Only every time I look at you." They sat in silence, but in that silence something bloomed. It happened beneath the stars. Cassian leaned in slowly, eyes searching hers. Illyra didn't pull away. His lips brushed hers, soft and unsure, but she met him with certainty. When they parted, Cassian whispered, "I've waited my whole life for something real." Illyra smiled, hand on his chest. "Then let's stop wasting time." Months passed. Milo and Jonathan became brothers in spirit. Illyra went back to school with Cassian's support, pursuing counseling for women in trauma recovery. Cassian, once obsessed with profit margins, now funded shelters, legal clinics, and scholarships. They had turned their pain into purpose. In court, Verena and Nolan sat cold and pale as the jury read the verdict, guilty. The nation watched. Cassian and Illyra didn't attend. They didn't need to. Justice had already arrived. Their first Christmas together was quiet. The tree was crooked, the kids bickered. Illyra burned the pie. Cassian laughed harder than he had in years. There were no gifts more precious than peace. Cassian knelt before Illyra on a spring morning, sunlight dancing in her curls. "I don't want to live another day without calling you my wife." Tears filled her eyes. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married under the trees where they first met, not a grave, a garden. The past had tried to bury them, both of them, but from the dirt they rose. Together they built a life forged from betrayal and bathed in truth. They turned their scars into stories and their heartbreak into healing for others. This wasn't just a love story, it was a resurrection. And if you believe in second chances, forgiveness, and the power of unexpected kindness, subscribe for more stories that remind us the world can still surprise us in the best ways.